Superman 2025 might not have been the best Superman movie, but it was still refreshing to see a return to the classic form of Superman. One who isn't afraid to kick his dog, or to feel regret when a kaiju dies from severe indigestion.
Oh, my stomach.
Today we're going to take a look at what this new Superman movie did right. We're going to look at the background, the story, the characters, the themes, and the legacy. Because the movie was not just a return to form, but it was an introduction to the new DCU. And it did what it needed to do in some ways, and in other ways it excelled. So let's get into it. So this new Superman movie was based on All-Star Superman. According to IGN, All-Star Superman is the #1 Superman story. In All-Star Superman, Superman knows that he's going to die. So he goes out and he performs these 12 labors. The 12 labors are based on the 12 labors of Hercules. DC came out with a box set of comics that James Gunn referenced as his inspiration. These include All-Star Superman, Superman for All Seasons, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and Kingdom Come. And for the very cheap price of $85, you too can own your own box set of Superman comics. This Superman was more of a return to the classic virtuous Superman, similar to the one that was played by Christopher Reeve. The Henry Cavill Superman, while cool, was definitely for older audiences. Christopher Reeve's Superman was for a lot younger audiences. But this new version is a squirrel-saving Honest Abe with Space Daddy issues.
Says the bro whose personality is Boy Scout with daddy issues.
So essentially he's really relatable. But luckily Earth Daddy isn't problematic, so Superman can count on him. One thing that this new Superman did really well is show how Superman can be vulnerable and how he grows. For a protagonist to really work, there must be something for him or her to overcome. Something that makes him or her grow. This is why sometimes it can be difficult to convincingly write strong characters in movies. Because they are so powerful, it sometimes is difficult to find something that they can overcome. Take, for example, the Incredible Hulk. Incredible Hulk is really strong, and in Endgame, instead of giving him something that he could overcome, they just nerfed him. They just made it so that Bruce Banner wouldn't turn into the Hulk. Or look at Sentry from the Thunderbolts. Sentry is way too powerful for the Thunderbolts. There was never any stakes. At no point did we think that Sentry was going to lose to the Thunderbolts. He was just too strong. Or look at Superman in Zack Snyder's Justice League. It was really hard for him to really overcome anything because he's just so strong. Without realistic obstacles for characters to overcome, they can get boring, and it's not really interesting to watch them. So one way they addressed this in the new Superman movie is they had started him off at the very beginning by losing to the Hammer of Baravia, which was really smart. At the very beginning, he's already starting off with a loss. So he already has something that he needs to overcome. The Hammer of Baravia, or we later know that is Lex Luthor. Or later on in the movie, Superman is in the Pocket Universe, and he's next to Metamorpho, who can turn his hands into kryptonite. This is another opportunity for Superman to overcome something. And it gives him more depth, and it makes his character more interesting. But I do have to wonder, and the flaw here is pretty obvious. And for a genius like Lex to overlook it, it kind of makes you go, I mean, Lex puts him in an easily escapable situation. What if Metamorpho turns? What if some of the other superheroes come to rescue Superman? What if Superman finds a way to subdue Metamorpho? I mean, he can't stay awake forever. There are just too many ways that Superman could have escaped that situation. And throughout the story, there are other things that happen to Superman that add to his depth or to his character. For example, when he's fighting the kaiju battle is not a loss. It's an opportunity to show how ethical Superman is even when fighting monsters. He's not a killing machine. Then he had to beat Ultraman, and this he did with Krypto. And we also know that it wasn't really a battle with Ultraman, but it was a battle with Lex Luthor, which means that Superman had to be smarter than Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor was so angry, all he could think of is 1A, 1A, 1A. So in that moment, Superman does outsmart him by bringing in Krypto, whom Lex Luthor had forgotten about because he was so consumed with his emotions. Then he does finally get his dominating win against the Raptors, but he just demolishes them. Which again shows how difficult it is to write for strong characters, because in some situations they're just going to demolish everybody. But I thought this movie did a really good job of getting that balance right with Superman. So I have to admit, when I first watched Superman, I did not like Lex Luthor. More specifically, I didn't really like Nicholas Hoult, because when I saw him, he didn't really look like the classic versions of Lex Luthor that I'm used to. I'm more used to the Lex Luthor from the comics, who's bigger and a little bit older. However, Nicholas Hoult did convince me through his acting, through his emotion. He really went all in on this character, and it really shows. So as I was reevaluating my opinion on Lex Luthor, I kind of had to look at it as a bit of a new version of Lex Luthor, a new interpretation. Because even though Lex Luthor can be a little bit emotional in the comics, Nicholas Hoult certainly took it a step further. I mean, he was cheering on his team as they did well in the beginning, beating Superman. He gets overly emotional when he thinks he has Superman beat when he's controlling Ultraman. Then at the end, he lets his emotions get the best of him and he starts crying when he's already lost. Because even in defeat, Lex is trying to show how much better he is than Superman. Because another thing about these two characters, Lex Luthor and Superman, is that they contrast in almost every way. Now, this is true in the comics, but it's really good contrast in this movie as well. Some of the ways they contrast is that Superman has powers. Superman cares for people. He helps people. He learns to control himself better. He came from humble beginnings. He has hair. They both have somewhat secret identities, but Lex's is revealed at the end while Superman still isn't. One thing that really impressed me is that in a movie, we're usually not going to get as much development or as much depth into character, but we really got a lot with Nicholas Hoult's Lex Luthor. He was excellent as the antagonist. Let's talk about some of the themes and symbols from Superman. Now, there have been some discussions about what Baravia actually represents, but there are a few things to consider. First is that Baravia has existed in the DC universe since 1939. It's been there for a long time. Also, in the movie, we don't see any kind of a leader for Jaranpur. So it's not really a fair contrast if we're going to compare Baravia with Jaranpur, because one of them doesn't have a leader. Also, James Gunn has said that it's not really a direct contrast to anything in modern day, but we should go with what the movie shows us and not necessarily what the director says. Also, there is a really wide contrast between the two militaries. Or actually, it's easier to say between the one military and the non-existent military. There's really only one military in this movie, and it's for Baravia. So if there is a modern day parallel, it's pretty weak. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is what the movie had to say about social media. And yes, we'll get to the monkeys. So one thing, if you remember, there was one character that kept on taking selfies, but she wasn't actually taking selfies. She was taking things in the background, but making it look like selfies. A really smart message to be careful that even though you might be taking selfies, there's a lot more in your pictures than just what you think. Also, having the interview that Lois Lane gave to Superman, having that leak a few days before the movie was released was actually really smart. Because I remember when that interview dropped, and there was a lot of concern about this isn't my Superman. But then if you watch the movie, then you see that it makes a lot more sense. The message being that one clip in a smaller context doesn't give the whole message. We need to see the whole context for it to really make sense. I thought that was a really smart thing, and it may have been unintentional, but it was still good to see. Also, we have Lois and Superman's different opinions on social media. Lois tries to understand and use it, whereas Superman just gets defensive about it. Then we have the social media monkeys.
It was the best of times. It was the blurst of times, you stupid monkey.
Those online trolls that are always just there to create some kind of negativity. There was one issue for me though, and that is the believability of social media. Everyone really turned on Superman on a dime when that story dropped about what Superman's father said to him. I thought the movie dismissed too quickly the truthfulness of what that message was actually saying, but also I do understand the message that sometimes a story, when it drops online, that somebody's career could end in an instant. And while Superman never really is redeemed from that arc, something else that I thought was another plot hole, but eventually at the end, the focus shifts to Lex Luthor. So what this movie had to say about social media was really interesting. Be careful what you post on social media. Some people are there just to generate hate, and things can change on an instant on social media. So let's talk a little bit about the legacy of this movie. So there have been stories about how after this movie, comic books have been selling out of their Superman comics. There are several stories of parents taking their children to go see Superman, something that they have been waiting for years. And you know, Batman, he might be a good character for adults. He's a lot darker and he's a lot grittier. But Superman is where it all begins. He is the gateway for a lot of people into the superhero world. And James Gunn has really given younger superhero fans something that is more on their level. Someone who has a moral code. Someone who protects animals, even though some people wanted to remove that scene from the movie, but James Gunn insisted that it stay in the movie. Yes, this Superman is different from the Snyderverse Superman, but he should be though. We shouldn't get the same iteration of that character over and over again. It's refreshing to have something different. And this one really was very good. So was this movie perfect? Of course not. But it really has a lot of things going for it. It does what it's supposed to do. It made a movie for younger audiences and for nostalgic audiences to care once again about Superman. And I definitely was here for it. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. What did you like about this new James Gunn Superman? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.